You're listening to episode 37 of Present Moment. Welcome to Present Moment, Mindfulness, Practice, and Science. I'm Ted Meissner. Present Moment is a podcast with interviews, conversations, and roundtable discussions. We speak with mindfulness researchers about their newest findings published in peer-reviewed science journals, teachers about their understanding and methods as they work with students of mindfulness, authors about their books and interests, and we also speak with everyday practitioners. The website presentmomentmindfulness.com has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Executive Director Beth Navon joins us to speak about the Lineage project, mindfulness practices for youth at risk. More and more, we find that secular contemplative practices are being introduced into school systems and are having a positive impact on the behavior and performance of our children. Not all kids have the same opportunities, however, as socioeconomic and race shouldn't, but does factor into opportunities for learning and practicing. Some organizations have taken on the challenge of opening the door of mindfulness for youth at risk and in need. Beth Navon has been an administrator in the nonprofit sector for more than 25 years and a yoga practitioner for more than 35. Before coming to Lineage in February 2009, she was the director of a juvenile justice organization where she increased the budget tenfold. Recognized for her expertise in the mental health field, Beth has led workshops, served on panels, and moderated national conferences. She has also published several articles and a book chapter describing methods for replicating the nationally recognized service delivery model she created for youth re-entering the community after incarceration. Beth graduated from Simmons College with a master's degree in social work in 1973 and was certified in executive management from Columbia University's School of Business in 2003. Our guest today is Beth Navon. Beth, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
So tell us a little bit about your background working in the juvenile justice system.
Well, I was trained over 40 years ago as a social worker, and I always worked in communities where there were challenges of not enough resources. I worked with families and children, and that became my focus. When I moved to New York 30 years ago, I had the opportunity to get involved with an organization that worked with young people coming home from Rikers Island, which is the city jail. And I became very, very immersed in the community of people and advocates who were creating programming for the issues of reintegration back into society, I guess you would call it, after incarceration. And so the last 20, 25 years, I've run organizations that focus on young people, young adults who've been incarcerated or at high risk for incarceration. And it fits with where I began as somebody who was very committed to working with people who needed alternatives, who needed a sense of hope, where there wasn't necessarily historically the case, where people needed more choices in life, opportunities. And so that's what brought me to this. And I guess over those 20, 25 years, I've really learned a lot about juvenile justice, criminal justice in the United States, and of course, in New York City and New York State.
And I also know you're a long-term yoga practitioner. Can you tell us about your introduction to that and to mindfulness?
Yes, I was somebody from very young who had dreams of becoming a dancer, a modern dancer. And when I was in my 20s, I found a wonderful teacher whose name is Arawana Hayashi, and I took her modern dance class. And she did a lot of movement in modern dance that somebody might say had an element of Tai Chi or Qigong. When I went up to her, she was leaving to start actually the dance department, the first dance department at Naropa University. And so she left to go there. And I said I would miss her a great deal. And she said to me, Beth, because of the way you've responded to my choreography, I think you would really love taking yoga and becoming a yoga practitioner. And she led me to some thoughts about starting with hatha, and I did. And I've been doing it ever since. And when I turned 60, which was 5 years ago, I decided to get my certification as a yoga teacher. So I am both a social worker and a yoga teacher. And when I came to the Lineage project 6 years ago, I had not necessarily been that involved in the mindfulness meditation community. But that is the community that's also the meditation community throughout this country and other countries, is part of what informs what we do at Lineage. And as a result, not only am I very connected to the whole yoga community, and it is really internationally at this point because people contact us a lot, but really very connected to the meditation community. And through that, I guess, in combination with all the mindfulness in education movement that I'm more familiar with in the United States versus internationally, but I think it's catching on in other places. And we now call what we do mindfulness. And I guess I would call myself now a mindfulness practitioner, and I do meditate now, and I do yoga, and I just began taking Budokan yoga, which is quite challenging, and I love it.
Wonderful. Well, tell us about Lineage Project. What is it?
Okay, the Lineage Project was started in 1998. There was a man who was a meditation teacher on the West Coast, and his name is Soren Gordhammer. And Soren got interested in the ideas of working with people who had trauma by using meditation. And one of the people that he modeled his thinking, his work that informed him was John Kabat-Zinn, Dr. Kabat-Zinn, who was really one of the first people, a psychiatrist, to use meditation with incarcerated adults, with cancer patients, and he really did the first research. This was in the early 80s to show that it really had an impact on people who were suffering from cancer, people who were incarcerated, very vulnerable populations. So Soren looked at Dr. Kabat-Zinn's work, and he said, wait a minute, we've got to be trying this with children. We've got to be trying this with children who are incarcerated. And so in Alameda County, in the San Francisco area, is where there are what they call youth halls there, which is essentially when a youth is arrested. That's where they are either serving time or waiting adjudication. And Soren went in. He somehow was able to get in, and he began doing meditation with some of those young people. And he saw that they responded. And at the same time, he had to move unexpectedly because of family to New York City. And so Soren left that work very early on into it and came to New York City. When he was here, he said, okay, this is it. I'm not going to give that up. I'm going to see what I can do in New York City with young people who are incarcerated by using meditation. techniques to see if there can be an impact on their future, on the level of recidivism, of reoffending. So he somehow got onto that, I don't know, onto Rikers Island, which is the city jail. And New York State is only one of 2 states left that incarcerate 16-year-olds as adults, regardless what they've done. So you can have a misdemeanor and be 16, and you're incarcerated as an adult at Rikers Island Correctional Facility, which is a facility for thousands of people. So Soren said, wait a minute, these 16, 17-year-olds are in there. They're in this kind of a setting. I want to go in. He went in, and again, he began to see a responsiveness that certainly the personnel in the correctional institution did not expect to see. But these young people were attentive. Of course, he's a charismatic person, but these young people were very attentive. And he really could see some changes. The staff in the correctional facility could see some changes in the level of violence that was going on. And Soren made that connection. And again, that connection was there from Dr. Kabat-Zinn's work, again in the 80s, before people really, I think, knew the word, maybe, mindfulness. Then again, suddenly Soren had to leave the East Coast, and he handed the organization. At that point, what he had done was connected with a place called the Tide Center, which is a nonprofit that fiscally sponsors projects that are really innovative. So it's in San Francisco. You can approach them. You pay a fee, but they essentially, you become part of their nonprofit organization. And that is what Soren did. So by doing that, you use their federal tax ID, you can receive grants, you can raise money, you can do your services, but in essence, you're under the Tide Center. So after Soren left, he handed the program over to a woman named Tawana Kane, who was a yoga practitioner. And what she did was really begin to hone a curriculum. Soren would spend about a half an hour with young people, teaching them meditation. But when Tawana came in, she developed an hour-long curriculum that consisted of both doing yoga, asana, and doing meditative games, techniques. She also introduced the concept of having an element of themes for each class. So Tawana came in, stayed, and developed this curriculum. She was able to grow into offering these classes to places like Job Corps and a few nonprofits. So it was very, very small, but she created this curriculum, offered it to the young people now in different kinds of settings, and again began to see an impact. Next person came in to run the organization. It had a very difficult time, very challenging time surviving. In 1998 and the early 2000s, this was not something that people saw necessarily as legitimate. Certainly, there wasn't the kind of research on its efficacy as there is now. These are young people who have crossed a line, incarcerated. There are a ton of reasons why this organization inched by year to year. Tides did not fiscally support it. In fact, we pay them to keep the books, but there were family foundations who supported us. It's a long-winded way of saying that there was a lot of change in the people who came in at the top, trying different things, trying to professionalize, I think, trying to create contacts within the community of juvenile justice and the correctional system in New York City. And then the board decided, there was a board, an advisory board, that they wanted someone to come in to Lineage We were getting always from the get-go, people were very, very interested in the kind of innovative work that was being done with the young people. And so they decided the young people in the communities now would call me an old head. I don't know if you know that term, but that was what the board of directors, the advisory board, over 6 years ago decided need to happen. They needed to find an old head to come in and help Lineage really get on its feet, develop a more extensive curriculum, develop a lot more, many classes, relationships, and in I came. And I came in with 20 years of experience in working in juvenile justice, working in the correctional system as a social worker, as a yogi, as a meditator. Sort of the pieces came together, and they brought me in very specifically to grow, stabilize, professionalize Lineage Project. And I'm very pleased to say that over the 6 years, we really have come a great distance. When I came in, we were in 8 different settings, offering classes weekly. We had 5 teachers offering the classes. Today, we serve over 2,000 young people. We have 40 classes a week. We're in 24 different settings. And the biggest news for Lineage Project is on September 18th, we became our own 501c3 nonprofit. So we are standing on our own feet, our own 2 feet now for the first time since 1998. And it's just thrilling because, again, it opens all kinds of doors for us in terms of funding, because there's a lot of funders, and rightfully so, who don't want 15 or 10% of their money going to a fiscal sponsor. Now, Tides has been fantastic. They're a fantastic organization, but it was time for us to do this.
Yeah, for folks who are listening to the podcast and you're wondering, Soren Gordhammer, where have I heard that name before? It's from Wisdom 2.0.
That's right.
Probably more familiar with him there. And I also wanted to mention that, let's see if I have this, so you can hear some sounds going on here. I hold in my hand a business card from Tawana Kane. I had the great joy of meeting in person, albeit very briefly, at the scientific conference at the Center for Mindfulness this past year, and I'm following up with her to get her on the podcast, hopefully, so keep your fingers crossed, to talk about diversity issues. So, Beth, tell us a little bit about the kids that you work with. What are they like, and how do they get connected with Lineage Project's programs?
Right. The range age of our young people is essentially 10 years old, and then to young adults, 24 years old. Originally, as I said, Soren was in the detention center with the 16 to 18-year-olds. At this point, we've broken out, and I like to say that it's really young people who share many, many things in common. And they all have been in many, many systems. So 10 to 24-year-old young people, primarily young people of color. Dr. Eddie Ellis, who was a professor at Medgar Evers and did a first study of who are the incarcerated populations in New York City, defined the neighborhoods that fill the jails and the prisons. And there are 15 neighborhoods statistically proven that fill the jails. And these are our children they are, as I said, young people of color. They are in extreme poverty. There's a great deal of inability to progress in school, have school success, family supports, lack of opportunities, availabilities, after school programs, resources. Essentially, these are communities in New York City, 15 of them, that have very, very few resources And as people know, I think very difficult statistic that is true nationally, I believe, that something like 1 in 5 young Black man will have some interaction, some intersection with the juvenile criminal justice system. It's really staggering kinds of statistics. I'm not making a judgment about it. I'm just saying these are who happen to be the young people that we are focused on.
And it's also an interesting metric from your site that over half of your students report having experienced alcohol or substance abuse issues. And this isn't just having tried drinking or controlled substances, it's abuse issues with these.
Correct. And we say that the majority of our young people suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome in the sense that they've been exposed to violence. The neighborhoods are violent neighborhoods. There is a ton of loss. A lot of the men in these communities are incarcerated or have been incarcerated. Loss, sadness, trauma really define these young people. And you can hear various statistics on how many of the young people and adults too locked up suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. But from the place where we sit, we really think the majority do. The young women, it's somewhere between 75% and up have been physically, sexually, emotionally abused. The mental health issues for these young people, post-traumatic stress is certainly a mental health issue, but the other kinds of mental health issues are just pervasive among this population of young people. And again, you can get different stats, but there are people who will say that 80% of young people and adult people who are incarcerated suffer from some issue of mental health challenge. And certainly the history of institutions, hospitals, state-run hospitals being closed down, all of which was very hopeful and exciting to those of us who were opposed to that system, did not realize that there would be a shift, in fact, to having these people not in community mental health clinics because there was not enough money, but are becoming the incarcerated population in this country. And I think there's a lot more acknowledgement of that this has become the state institutions. So these are very challenged young people with very little hope, very few models for their future. These young people have said to me, I don't think I'm going to live beyond the age of 19, and they mean it.
Beth, it's interesting that you have on the site descriptions of 75% of your students suffering from PTSD, and when you couple that with, and these ages are between 10 and 24.
Mm-hmm.
This is not an adult population. This is PTSD as a teenager.
Correct.
And so the criticality of the work you do facing those challenges is incredible. And I was wondering if you would care to share some of your personal favorite success stories, especially in the face of those unfortunately very human statistics.
Right. Yes, I do have several of them. One is we are working in what's called an alternative to incarceration program, which is for young people ages 18 to 24. It's at a nonprofit organization. It's for young people who have been found guilty of a crime, are facing a year in jail, but for a variety of reasons, whether it's family support, it's also the nonprofit organization will go in and talk to the judge that they will agree to take them in lieu of incarceration. So they're facing a year. The judge can assign them to participate in daily activities at the nonprofit organization in lieu of a year in jail. And they can be at any point if things do not go well. There are mandates, they have to be in, there are curfew. There's a lot of heavy duty requirements, and rightfully so. But if they're able to meet them, they can stay in the community, live at home, and get education, employment help, counseling, et cetera, et cetera. So the judges consider us offering an anger management class. So we qualify as one of the services that the judge likes to see.
If they want to call it anger management, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, we do really too. And actually, just a quick side before I tell you the story, we have a research team. And one of our researchers was speaking to one of the young people in the program. And she said, this nonprofit offers anger management. What's the difference, do you think, between anger management that you get in that group and our group? And he said, well, there we talk about it. With you folks, we do it. We feel it. We know what it is. It's in our bodies. It's in our heads. So a young man comes running into the class at this organization in the alternative to incarceration spot, and he's giggling and he's laughing. And our teacher says, what's going on? What's happening with you? And he said, I have to tell you what happened to me. You have to listen to this. He said, I was running late. And so I was on my way here to class. And I was pulling out my clothes and pulling up my pants. And a police person stops me and says, what are you doing? And he said, I'm going to my yoga class. And the policeman was like, again, nothing at all about police. But he said, yeah, right. Give me another one. Tell me another one. And the young man looked at the policeman. He said, you know what, officer? Before I practiced yoga, you would have been handcuffing me and taking me to Rikers because I would have been up in your face, screaming and threatening you. But because I've learned these practices, I know you have a job to do and I have a class to go to. And he turned and he started to walk away. And then he turned back and he said, Namaste. And he said to the officer, do you know what this means? And the officer said, no. And he proceeded to tell him and continue on to class. And so, there's a lot of requests for us to prove statistically that these practices can allow a young person not to return to incarceration. It's a very hard thing to do, but if that story doesn't tell you that, I don't know what does.
Give us another one more success story.
Okay. There was, this is a new program in New York State where young people who are convicted of a crime can serve time in the city because they're mostly from New York City. And in the past, they would be sent to institutions in New York State, and they wouldn't be able to be involved at all during their incarceration with their families, realistically. So this is a new program called Close to Home. It's run by the juvenile justice system. And this young woman was taking classes with our teacher, and she was being discharged. And she told the institution where she was that she couldn't leave until she had her last class with our teacher. She was able to get out, like 8 a.m, and our class wasn't till 3:00 in the afternoon. But she just sat there with her bags packed and she waited for the class. And when our teacher came, the teacher asked her, since it was her last class, did she want to teach it? And she beamed, and she did. She led the entire class. Our class is a little bit of discussion, it's movement, and again, meditation, games, and coming together. She did a beautiful job. This is actually in a facility for LGBTQ young women, and the young women cheered and clapped, and she left. About a week later, our teacher saw her in the subway. She came bounding up, big smile. And the teacher said, how are you? And she said, I'm okay. I have a job at a community center. And she told our teacher, doing this stuff with you made me want to work helping other people.
That's wonderful. And what I find particularly interesting about that is the fact that she stayed when she could have left is such positive evidence to weaken that argument of, oh, students are just taking this in order to get a lighter sentence or an easier time or to get out of something else. Like, not necessarily so. So, Beth, what are some of the biggest challenges that Lineage Project faces?
Well, one of the things that I hadn't really gone over so much is that we don't have an office. We have all of our teachers. We have 12 teachers and we have 8 volunteers go all over the city to every borough into host settings, we call them. So it's detention centers. We're in schools for kids who've been suspended. We're in regular public schools. We're in this alternative to incarceration. We're in a homeless shelter. So we are asked by people to come in and offer our classes. And people want us there. However, in all of these different settings, there's tremendous challenges. For instance, last night I took a potential wonderful funder with us to a detention center. We walked in, we'd spent about a year trying to work out a way that when we came in, we were escorted in, because you have to be escorted in on time so that we could do our hour-long class. And it really was up and down. We would come and sometimes we would have 5 minutes, and sometimes we would have the time, and sometimes nobody would show up to escort us in. It's just the reality of the system. And again, it's not against the system. It just was the reality. So we finally felt that we'd worked it out. And I went in last night and we show up. And there was somebody to escort us, except they told us that the young people who were going to take the class had been scheduled for another activity. So they went trying to find other young people who would take the class. They found 3 incredible young people, and these are all kids under the age of 16 in the juvenile justice system. I think one was 14, 15. And they came in. We had an amazing class, a really amazing class, very poignant. And all of a sudden, after 45 minutes, the officer who has to be in the room said, oh, they have another thing scheduled. So they have to go. I mean, we hadn't even gone into meditation yet, but she was wonderful and she let us do it. So my main point is that we're going into other people's houses. We are at the mercy, shall we say, of the environment where we're going. And many, many, many of the organizations, the institutions welcome us, facilitate things for us, support us, join us. We require that a staff person is in our class with us. But sometimes in certain systems, you cannot change it. You cannot do it. I have teachers where I have to spend a lot of time talking with them about the fact that we just can't change it. And if it's 5 minutes that we're able to give, then it's 5 minutes that we're able to give. But it's very hard. These teachers are beautiful, passionate, loving, giving people. And so it is a real challenge not to have our own space. We'd love to have our own studio and have young people from the community come, but we don't. We don't at this point. And so that's a real challenge.
Beth, how can people get involved with Lineage Project?
Well, if you go to our website, we have all kinds of ways to be involved. We do teacher trainings, community trainings 4 times a year. So people come from literally all over the world if they want to take a 20-hour training. It's Friday, Saturday, Sundays. And so they can learn all the ins and outs of our techniques. They can practice. They can bring it back to their own communities. So people can get involved by taking our trainings, which are listed on our website. If people are local, we have volunteers who come in and help us. We have them help us to teach with our staff teachers. They come in, and often the people that we hire as staff teachers are people who are volunteer teachers with us. I am me, myself, and I in terms of being at the helm, and anybody wants to offer any administrative services, any certain contacts, certainly for us, of how to get word out about us. This is so wonderful what you're doing by reaching out to us. But people don't know so much the extent or where we've come to, I guess. So people can help by spreading word, telling people about us. Of course, any kind of support to be able to give more classes, to serve more children through any kinds of donations is always, always welcome. Really everything and anything. People just need to, again, if you go on the website, you see how to reach me. And I'm pretty good about answering most inquiries. So if people want to help, just contact me.
Great. And I will testify, Beth does get back to you. I was happy to hear from her very quickly on my inquiry on just having this conversation. Our guest today has been Beth Navon, and Beth is the executive director at Lineage Project. The website, which is linked on the episode page for this episode, is www.lineageproject.org. Beth, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the website at presentmomentmindfulness.com. You'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. You can comment on the episode page and find show notes and other helpful resources for your mindfulness practice. The shakuhachi music heard on Present Moment is used by permission and through the generosity of musician Rodrigo Rodriguez. His website is linked on the Present Moment website on the About Podcast Music page. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on Present Moment.